OBS recording here. And we got Photoshop recording. Okay. So, what we're going to be trying to do is recreate a sphere using Photoshop. And this is just kind of an overview tutorial that gets us kind of to continue thinking about how we handle our artwork inside of software such as Illustrator and Photoshop. And as we can see here, here's a representation of a sphere. We have a directional light that's on this, that's giving us our primary brightness here. And we have a shadow. And really that's the goal that we're going to try to do, is create something like this. So again, we have our breakdown. This is just some picture off the interwebs that I found here on the light source. We have our highlight, we have our shadow, we have a core shadow. We also have something called reflective light, or reflected light, and our cast shadow. So if we break this thing down, there's not a lot that we have to worry about here, and it's actually pretty easy to do if we break it down and use masks for Photoshop. One of the important things to realize is that when we are making a sphere or anything like that, when we have a light shining on a source, and we have it bouncing back up on it, we end up having this reflected light. And so the darkest areas of your object are actually not in the areas that are directly touching the surface or on the edges. It's actually going to be a little bit more towards this core shadow where there's like crescent on here. So this is actually a pretty easy thing to get set up. I'm going to go into File. I'm just going to make a new document. Let's say that we're in a postcard will be fine. I'm going to tell this to be an orientation of a horizontal. And the rest of this will be fine. I'll hit Create. Okay. From here, all you got to do is go into a new layer, and I'm going to make a elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to drag that out while holding down the Shift key. Now I have this. Nothing here. Okay. Well, I'm actually going to go into my colors here, and I want this to be, let's say, for now, let's make this a medium gray. So over on the side, I'm going to sample like this middle ground color. Hit OK, and then Shift F5. Okay, so that went in content aware. So if I do Shift F5 again, you'll notice I want to change this actually to be my foreground color, which is this one. I'm going to hit OK. All right. Now, I don't like this background being so bright. It's very, very bright. All I'm going to do is go to my background layer here, and I'm going to unlock that for a second. I'm going to change this color. Maybe it's going to be something like I don't know, somewhere around here. Shift F5. Whoops. You don't see it because it actually filled this in area right there. So I'm going to deselect everything. I'm going to tap the M key, click. Everything's deselected. Shift F5, and there we go. A little bit easier on the eyes to see this. From here, I will take this layer, and I'm actually going to hold down Control and click on it, and it sampled all the pixels that are inside of this layer. I'm going to make a mask. We've talked about those since the second week of class. We have a mask here. And I will also make a palette. So I'll call this palette. And I'm sure I'm spelling palette wrong. Whatever. All right. I'm going to sample some colors. So let's say that we have white. I'm going to use my brush tool by tapping the B key. Make that a little bit bigger there. So I know that this is my white. I'm going to go down to maybe around here. I have a gray. Hard to see it because it's almost that same gray, but I know it's there. You can kind of see it a little bit better when you get closer up to it. I'm going to change this one to maybe a mid-tone. And I'm also going to go a color below that. And black. Okay, so I have these different colors. These are ones that I can work with to start painting. From here, all I'm going to start doing is starting to add some of these colors into this scene. And to do that, I'm going to make sure that my brush tool, which we've talked about the brush, we've used it for our sketching, things like that, but I want to make sure that it is set to a round. So if we look at the settings on this right here, there we go. It's round, and I have softness. So the hardness, if this was up all the way, it'd be very crisp on the edges. I want that to be soft. I want to go into something like my shape dynamics. And pen pressure's on for this. And let's see, also underneath my transfer, so we'll turn this one on. I have opacity. Let's turn that one on to pen pressure. Let's turn my flow on to pen pressure. That means that when I paint with my brush, when I start to paint, the lighter I am on this brush, the less easy it is to see. But if I were to, let me make that a little bit bigger. If I push harder, you can start to see that a little bit better. So a little bit more control that I have for this brush. Okay. So now that I have this ready to go, my Wacom tablet is again set up so it's going across both screens here. I need to go into here, type in Wacom, mapping, portion 1. Okay, so just making sure all it's on for that. There we go. Good. Photoshop. There we go. 1. Close that. Okay. My controls are a lot better. Now, if I need to be able to use reference, such as this thing, I'm going to copy this image. So I'm just going to type print screen on my keyboard. And again, that's above our insert key on these keyboards here. So print screen, go into Photoshop, File, New, Clipboard, hit Create, Control V to paste. So all I want is this part right here. And again, this is just a little trick on being able to grab something from a screen. Maybe you can't copy and paste it. Maybe it says it's like, when you go to save it, it's a web image or something like that. I have it set up like this. I'm going to go into Image Crop. Whoops. And now I've got this image. I'm going to take this whole setup here, middle mouse button drag, or left mouse button drag, so I have this kind of floating on top. And now I have my reference. Very easy for me to be able to work with this. So now that I'm ready to go, I'm going to start working with this dock right here. This color right here, maybe I should sample a little bit of a lighter color. So I'll just sample this light tone, Shift F5. All right, I've got that. Now let's start adding some colors. So I'm going to go into a new layer. I'll make another mask, and I'll start painting. So this is just sort of a backup way for me to work. Now, anywhere I paint, it's going to stay inside of the sphere. So if I sample this gray, use the brush tool, and increase that. I'm going to start painting some of this. Now, because I'm sampling 5 different colors, I can easily apply the color to this object and not go too far with it. I'm just using the default round brush, and I just changed the settings so my transfer allows for me to have pen pressure on that. Now, if I pressed harder, I'll get more color on it, but I'm really trying to just slowly build this thing up. And if I screw up, big deal. It's just digital ink. I can go around this a little bit more. So I'm just working up my shadows on here. And again, what I'm trying to get is, if we look at this, we have shadow area, we have highlight, we have our core shadow. That's the big thing I'm trying to build up now. And then I want to get that reflected light in there. So if I go into a darker tone, I'm not going to use black, but I'll go with like this darker tone right here. Again, this is why I have a palette built up. It's very easy for me to be able to swap on these colors. I'll go maybe around here. And I'm lightly touching the surface of my tablet. And if I go bigger, I have more control. You'll notice I'm not filling this whole sphere as I go. It's actually only giving me a little bit of color on that. Still going around. And I see that there is some darker areas around this edge, so I'll go maybe a little bit smaller. And again, very subtle touch of my tablet, that pen, to get this start going. Again, you'll notice too, I'm arcing my hand around in this like sort of the C shape, so this crescent shape as I go. That allows for me to kind of get this to build that up. Okay, so I got this going on. All right. Need to bring in some more. I can go darker. And again, as long as I'm not, if I take this thing and I push down on it, immediately we got an issue. Now it looks cool. It's got a lot of contrast on it, but it hit too hard too fast. So if we think about how this core shadow is actually happening here, if I look at what's going on this piece, so we kind of see this like shape right here. That's kind of what we're trying to get at for this. So again, this is a demo or an exercise. I made this on purpose. It's a pretty quick one. If you don't like your results, it's just a matter of practicing over and over again on that. It's not like you have to learn a ton of new tools on this to get this going. What's that? Yep, and I'm also going over it a few times. So by doing that, it allows for me to kind of push back on some of these colors. Or the colors, the darkness on this. Okay. So I'm noticing, let's see, if I turn this off. I like what that's doing. Maybe my shape dynamics. I'm going to turn off the size jitter on this. And what that's going to do is prevent these striations on it. You'll notice with the size jitter on, and when I draw, little tiny ones and then big, it's kind of a little bit too obvious on some of these brush strokes. So what I'll do is turn off my pen pressure on this, and now when I paint, it's a lot more of an even flow to that. So I can adjust this a little bit more. And let's say I make a mistake. Maybe this went too dark too fast, like this. So, oh boy, that's intense. Well, just sample a lighter color. I'll sample this one, brush, and get that a little bit bigger. And you can see right away, within a couple strokes across this, we're sitting pretty quick. So pretty good. Okay, and then paying attention, you see that bounce light on the bottom. It's not coming directly from my light source. It's a bounce from the ground. Soon I'm going to have to switch into paying attention to my shadow, because that shadow has a lot to do with the information and how I'm perceiving this object. That bounce light is going to be telling me a lot. Not the bounce light, but the shadow and how it's making this kind of feel like it's resting on the surface. So I'm just tweaking this, and let's go into the black, and then do that again. Okay. From here, if I want to build out that shadow right here, that's not a hard thing to do. There we go. I'm going to go into my layer underneath, and a couple different ways. I'm going to show you if I just paint this by hand, go around like this. I can start to build this up pretty quickly. I'll sample a lighter color now and do that same thing across, like right around here. And if I don't like where this went, okay, that's fine. Let's sample the gray background and we'll just paint over some of these spots just to give ourselves a crisper edge to this. So again, going like this and going like that. Sampling again a dark color and getting right up against right around here. And there's how this is coming along. Now it is missing a couple of different spots and I can keep tweaking this, but you'll notice this is a pretty quick lecture on how we can get that going. It's missing a highlight. So I'm going to go back into my layer and I'm going to sample my highlight, which is the white, use the brush and just tap. And I'm just tapping a couple times on this. Got that. And then let's add a little bit more highlight around this edge here because this is a little bit too much neutral on that area. So I'm going to grab a large brush and just going around that edge here. Sampling that. Okay. And maybe just tweaking this bottom part so we have a little bit of that highlight. So you can see if we get really close to this, and again, these are little things that aren't talked about in that video demo I have, but the lecture, we're definitely talking about it right now. There's little spots where there's like that bounce light that's the strongest, like right around here. So if I get into that spot right here and I paint that, all I'm going to do is very subtle paint across that spot. And there we go. Now, if we have to tweak anything, these are more of a drastic measures. I could use something like my blur and my smudge tool. I'm going to use the smudge tool. So if I use the smudge tool and I move this around, you'll see right away, that's the paint tool. Smudge tool, okay. When I move this thing around, you can see how fast that'll change what's going on this. So I want to do that in a very subtle method. And I just maybe want a little bit of this tucked down because maybe this is a little bit too big on this piece. So I'm just going to push downwards with my smudge tool. And what I'm trying to do is just kind of control how big that little shadow or that bounce light is on here. So I'm just tapping downwards to get that out. Now when you use this, you will start to notice streaks that happen with a smudge tool. It's definitely going to happen. So it's a good idea to go over that area again with a regular brush to try and kind of get rid of that really bright streak or whatever might be happening there. Okay, this is nearly there. Using my brush tool again, I'll go back into this and zoom out to look at my reference. And I'm sure, how many people are in general drawing right now? Anybody? Nobody's in general drawing? Anyone in figure drawing right now? Okay. Yes, good. Okay. This will be a hell of a lot faster, by the way, than paint. Yeah. And less messy, right? So that's always nice. So, okay, I have this color. I'm going to go back to my black. I'm going to just push that a little bit more. I love oils. From the smell to the way they don't sit up on you. Okay, so this is coming along. Now, I showed you guys one way to make a shadow. Here's an easier, cheesier way to do it. I'm going to hide this one, make a new layer. I'm going to make the elliptical tool again, and I'm going to draw out a shape like this. So I got that. I'm going to sample maybe like that medium dark. So there's like mid-tone, medium dark, and then black. I'm going to sample that, and we go to Edit, Fill, foreground color. And then from here, I'm going to deselect so I have it like this. I'm going to go and you can see that there's a transparency issue with this. See how we can see through this piece? Easy thing to do. I have another layer of just this white sphere. So what we can do with this is, I'm going to take this one and put it above that. And so now that layer that was semi-transparent just has a medium color to make that not completely ghost. With this selected, I'm going to go into my filter, blur, Gaussian. So if I use Gaussian blur, why is it called Gaussian? I'm not sure. Probably the name of the inventor. I'm going to blur that thing out quite a bit. Okay. Now I'm going to change my opacity. So maybe it's only like 80%. And if I duplicate this layer now, I'm going to set this as multiply, Control T, and scale it. Notice I have that one right here, but I can also add something like this. I'll take that one and I'll scale that a little bit too. Okay. And then with this one, let's try to add another blur. Okay. And you can see this is grounding itself pretty well. I think this shadow might be a little crisp, so I'll just filter, blur, Gaussian. Just reduce that radius on that. Good. Control T. Maybe just scale that a little bit there. All right. Looking close to that. That's not too bad. There might be a little bit more of some darkness I should add to the sphere. So again, I'll just go in. I'll sample that dark color. And I will use my brush tool. Just kind of bring that a little bit further in. One thing to notice, I'm not sure if it shows up on your screen, but you might see a little white outline right around here. If we zoom in, kind of can see it a lot right there. That has to do with the fact that I have these two layers on top of each other. They may not 100% correspond with the pixels on that. So if I do experience that issue where there is this little bit of this rim, if I take that layer, I'm just going to paint over that the color I want it to be now. So I'll paint this, and you'll notice it starts to kind of go away pretty quickly. Of course, that was a bit intense on how that was handled, so I'll reduce that and just kind of paint across that a little bit more. So zooming out, you can see this is getting there. It needs a little bit more tweaks on that, but you can see that this is starting to look like the reference image that we're going for. And again, it's not a lot of time. It does take a little bit of practice, but if you had to take general drawing classes or any of the art classes, these are all things that are familiar to us on how we are constructing some of this stuff. So from here, I will make sure I have my stuff cleaned up. So I will call these two, I'll put them in a group, hitting Control G. We'll call that the sphere. And I'll call these shadow. And then if let's turn off that one and turn that one on. You can tell, I think it's always nice how we can take a shape and then blur it out to get that look. I think that works a heck of a lot better than the other one. Or even working together, they kind of do a nice job too. So that's how we have that ready. We would save this as a PSD, and we are all set for this one. The other one I'll show you on Wednesday on how we use Adobe Illustrator to do this exact same thing. So I'm going to stop this demo.